It's the 2022 World Cup. It's Croatia's players. Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. I'm Kevin and today we'll be looking at Croatia's squad for the 2022 World Cup. This preamble is going to be the same for every mediacast we do for the Players Series, so those familiar with it can jump ahead to around 3.5 to 4 minutes when we begin talking about the team. And the times for each section are at the top of the show notes, and for YouTube watchers there's a handy dandy timestamp that you can click to go directly to that point. For those looking for a quick version of this, you can skip to near the end of the mediacast, the last 10 minutes where we summarize the likely starters. And prior to that, with about 25 minutes remaining, we'll have some discussion on the squad. So the main issues with the squad, their club affiliation, some statistics, and an overview of new, injured, and outgoing players. We'll also be editing this mediacast into a shorter version for those who are just looking for an overview. For those looking for a deeper dive, you've come to the right place. We go through the players and how likely they are to make it to the final squad. And we explain why we think so and give information on each player's history and standing with the squad. The way we do this is by first organizing the players into their designated position. It should be noted that these are a bit artificial since players, especially Croatian players, do not always play in their coded positions. It's nevertheless a good way to organize the discussion. And then we go through the players and share some of the data we've collected in our soccer files. And using that data, we try to predict how likely the player is to make the team. Based mostly on the recent participation, but a couple of other factors as well. And we categorize them into definite, likely, possible but unlikely, and seem to be off the squad. We also mention big players who have recently retired, and we make note of any who are currently injured. We finish with a quick run through of the squad again and try to determine which of the players will be starters. Okay, and for those following on YouTube, we run a very simple graphic where we list the names, and you can actually see the players' names, which is fortunate because we're probably going to mispronounce a few of them. This is the same broadcast for the audio podcast, so we're going to try to repeat the names a few times to help listeners familiarize themselves so that you know who the player is when they step onto the field. And perhaps you can impress your friends by telling them something that you've learned here. And that's as much as we can do to this point, but as the rosters are being published, we will do an update episode on the teams and players. For the Players podcast, that will essentially be going over our predictions, updating them based on the games played to that point and any new information we find. And we will reveal which players were selected for the preliminary and final squad. So keep your eye out for those, probably in early to mid-November. All right, let's move on to talk about Croatia. And we did a couple of podcasts on Croatia. One was for the 2021 Euro Cup, 2020 Euro Cup actually, but it was in 2021. And we've recently finished a podcast on their group for this cup. There's also a short version of that. And so these are some of the takeaways from the previous podcast. But we'll kind of introduce them here and maybe talk about them more a bit after the player-by-player run through. So one question was 2018 just good fortune? And I'll deal with that one here. Certainly they emerged from what was widely seen as the easy bracket of the final stages of the World Cup. Also, Croatia's not regularly a top team, not regularly contenders at the semi-final level. However, like the old Yugoslavia, they can be relied on to pop up from time to time near the top, and their 1998 third place finish in the World Cup is evidence of that. However, that the group stage was their best finish apart from that is evidence of their intermittency And that was actually the next point, kind of intermittent success. These are more team issues, so we won't go into too much detail on it. But more than Serbia, Croatia has kind of followed the old Yugoslavia in as we saw in 1998 and 2018, just kind of popping up as successful and sometimes suffering big lows in between, sometimes not even making tournaments or getting knocked out in the group stage. So think of Croatia as a team of intermittent rather than steady success, but always kind of a danger. Another issue that came up is aging squad, and well, we'll see if this is true. Again, we'll talk about it at the end. But keep your eye out as we're going through the player-by-player podcast to see if we've been accurate in kind of in describing them that way. And finally, as far as the World Cup goes, will they be battling for first? Will it be kind of an easy second place, or will they find themselves battling with Canada and or Morocco for that second space spot, or even for even suffering third or fourth at their hands? Again, something that was more for the team podcast than for this player podcast. Focusing now more on the squad, we'll take a look at formations for recent games. So we'll go back as far as the Euro Cup in 2021. And we saw that in 3 of the games there, they had a 4-3-3 formation, and in one of the games, a 4-2-3-1 formation. So we're going to see that these 2 formations are their preferred formations. They basically go back and forth between those 2, although they do throw in an odd formation once in a while. For World Cup qualifying, we see basically the same thing, although it was a 4-2-3-1 equally as much as the 4-3-3 there. And then for game 5, which was against Cyprus, no, it was against at home to Slovakia, it was an odd 4-1-4-1 formation. And nevertheless, we are seeing 4 defenders at the back consistently, and basically the 3-man forward line. It's maybe good to view it as kind of a center forward along with 2 attacking midfielders. Usually, it's attacking midfielders who play that role for Croatia rather than forwards on the outside. So we moved to friendly, where they used a couple of weird formations, actually. They tried out a 3-man defense and a lot of new players in their friendlies. So kind of atypical games for them. A 3-5-2 in the first friendly, and that was against Slovenia. Played in Qatar, interestingly, were both of these friendlies. And the second one, a 3-1-4-2. Very unusual formation. I've rarely seen that. Again in Qatar, this one against Bulgaria. So really just using those games to try out different players and different formations. And obviously it didn't attract them too much, because in the Nations League, they went back to their regular formations, twice using the 4-2-3-1 and twice using the 4-3-3. So fairly evenly split between those 2 formations, a 4-2-3-1 and a 4-3-3. And you can kind of envision Croatia in that setup. Personally, I envisioned them more as a 4-2-3-1, even though they do use 4-3-3 about half the time. All right, time to move on to the player-by-player section of the podcast, by far the longest section. And we'll begin by talking about their manager. Actually, we're going to give a little bit of history to the story here, and for some of the other positions, especially in situations where there's kind of a hole remaining after somebody left. That's not really the case in this case. It was for a while. Niko Kovac was their manager all the way from 2002, all the way from 2002 to the 2014 World Cup. And we won't go into detail about him, but just to know that there was kind of a long-time manager in place there. For 2016, they went with Ante Kasic, and he didn't last long, just the 2016 tournament. And then the current manager, Zlatko Dalic, came in time for the 2018 World Cup. So he led them through that successful tournament and through the Euro 2020 Cup. And so has been in the position for a while, since 2017, in fact. And before that, he managed largely in Saudi Arabia, actually, from 2010 to 2017, Saudi Arabia and then United Arab Emirates. And prior to that, it was club teams in Croatia and one in Albania too. However, from 2006 to 2011, he was manager of the under-21 Croatian national team, so has been in the scene for quite a while. He played professionally from 1983 to 2000, but didn't earn any international caps there. So Zlatko Dalic looking to take them through the cup here, and let's look at goalkeepers. So we'll begin just by naming names and the candidates before us, and then we'll look at them in more detail. So again, here we'll begin with a couple of players who are out of the picture, and provide a bit of history on it. So Daniel Subasic was their keeper before, prior to this. We'll tell you why we're including him here. We also have Lovre Kalinic, who actually seems to be off the squad here. And we'll talk a little bit about him more in terms of historical than current candidates. In terms of current candidates, we have Dominik Livakovic as a definite candidate, Ivica Ivusic as a likely candidate, Ivo Grbic as a possible, and Nedeljko Labrovic also as a possible, and finally Simon Sluga as possible but unlikely. So let's just begin with a little history. We won't go into too much detail on these players, but just to provide the context, Daniel Subasic was the starting keeper for the Euro 2016 and the World Cup 2018 squad. He announced his retirement after the 2018 World Cup squad. And I'm presenting this mostly to show why they have basically new goalkeepers, or fairly new goalkeepers, as candidates for this. Lovre Kalinic is still actually around. He last appeared for the national team for the 2021 Euro Cup, but he's only 32 years old, so kind of an outside candidate. We sometimes see players coming back in to the squad, and he was the backup keeper, or at least on the roster, on the squads for the Euro 2016, World Cup 2018, and Euro 2020. But in all cases, he was a bench keeper playing behind the starter. So Lovre Kalinic, though, no longer seems to be a candidate as a backup keeper, again explaining why they have some less experienced players as their main candidates here. First up is Dominik Livakovic, not as inexperienced as the rest. He is a definite candidate, and we see him as the starter. He did start 6 of the 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup, and he was on the bench for the 7 others. So Dominik Livakovic has been with the team since 2017 and has 33 caps and he is 27 years old. He plays for Dinamo Zagreb in Croatia. That's one of the biggest teams in Croatia, so we'll see a lot of teams having been with that club. And his first tournament was the 2018 World Cup. In fact, actually, he was selected for the preliminary squad for the 2016 Euro Cup, but he didn't make the final cut. He did make the 2018 World Cup squad, though, and seems to have been the third string keeper there behind Subasic and Kalinic. Didn't see any action there. However, for the Euro 2020, he kind of jumped ahead of Lovre Kalinic to be the starting keeper. So he started and finished all 4 games there, and seems to be their starting keeper now. However, we'll see why he hasn't started or a lot of the games in the period since the Euro Cup. That's partly because Ivica Ivusic, the likely candidate, has played some of the games. He got his first cap in September 2021 and started 5 of their remaining 13 games. He was on the bench for 4 others and injured for 2. So there were 2 games he was not selected for. And Ivica Ivusic has been with the team just since 2021. So one of the new players, new goalkeepers, in fact, all of them are quite new here, since 2021 then, and 5 caps and 0 goals. He's 26 years old, 27 years old actually, and he plays for Osijek in Croatia since 2018, but he has been outside of Croatia playing for Olympiacos in Greece in 2018 and Inter Milan in Italy from 2014 to 15. He didn't play any games for Inter Milan. Rather, he was loaned to a much smaller club in Italy called Prato, but he was with Inter Milan's youth club for 5 years. So Ivica Ivusic looks like the backup keeper here. And we have 2 possible candidates also. So Ivo Grbic, and he started 2 of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup. And I'm going to call it the 2021 Euro Cup just to orient you to when it actually was. And he was on the bench for 4 games and not selected for 4 others. So Ivo Grbic, again, just like Ivusic, has been with the team since 2021, and just those 2 caps. He is 26 years old, and he plays for Atletico Madrid in Spain. So is maybe an up-and-coming keeper now that a couple of the bigger names have left the squad. Finally, we have Nedeljko Labrovic as a possible candidate. He got his first appearance on the bench in June 2022, so just recently. He didn't start any of those 4 games. But he was subbed in for all 4. No, he wasn't subbed in. He was on the bench for all 4 matches there. So he doesn't have any caps for Croatia. He's very young, just 23 years old, and he plays for Rijeka in Croatia and was with Šibenik before 2021. Nedeljko Labrovic. So it looks like those 2, Grbic and Labrovic, will be kind of vying for the 3rd string keeper squad. Simon Sluka also has an outside chance. We have him as possible but unlikely. He didn't start any of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup, but he was on the bench for 7. However, he kind of dropped off the team and wasn't selected for the last 6 matches, so making it less likely that he would reach the squad. Okay, well, we'll finish this section by kind of summarizing the position. So as we saw, even though Livakovic looks like the starter, he only played about half of their games since the Euro Cup. He did play all the games in the Cup, but in World Cup qualifying games, he played 3, but Ivusic played 2, and Grbic also played 2. And then Livakovic and Ivusic equally shared in the friendlies and the Nations League games towards the end. So it looks like it might be kind of a battle between the two, or it could be that, which I'm seeing more and more, teams are just rotating two players rather than having one consistent starter. So it'll be interesting to see what they do in September, and we'll update that in the podcast just before the World Cup. Let's move on now to defenders, and we will start with central defenders. So as we saw, they pretty much always go with two central defenders. They did try out three central defenders in friendlies, but seemed to return to two central defenders in the Nations League games in June. So we have no definite candidates here, but we have a likely candidate in Duje Kaleta-Kar, and in Dejan Lovren, and in Domagoj Vida, all likely candidates. We also have Josko Gvardiol as a possible candidate, Josko Gvardiol, and in fact, we have several possible candidates. Marin Pongracic, Marin Pongracic, and Martin Erlich, and Josip Sutalo. I should probably put those two above Pongracic because they've played more. Anyway, I'll repeat the names: Martin Erlich and Josip Sutalo. And we also have Mile Skoric as a possible but unlikely candidate. Okay, sorry about the delays there. So let's go through the players. We'll talk about Duje Kaleta-Kar, one of the three likely candidates. So he started 6 of their games since the Euro 2021 Cup, and he subbed in for 1 and was on the bench for 5. Just one match that he wasn't selected for. And the reason there's no definite candidate here is because they seem to rotate among these 3, which we'll talk about when we summarize the position. Anyway, so probably closer to a definite candidate, but 6 of their 13 games made us put him as likely. Duje Kaleta-Kar has been with Croatia since 2018, but in that time he has 23 caps and 1 goal. He's 26 years old. Recently moved to Southampton in England in 2022, but was with Marseille in France before that, and Red Bull Salzburg prior to that. And he did make the World Cup in 2018, the year he earned his first cap, but he was only a substitute there. So he appeared only in game 3, which was a B team game for Croatia. However, by the 2020 Euro Cup, he was a starter, and but only 2 of the games 1 and 4 there. So perhaps they were rotating there as well. Okay, so he scored 1 of their goals in qualifying, by the way. And we'll move on to Dejan Lovric. So Dejan Lovric started 4 of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup. He was on the bench for 1, but he was injured for the last 6 games and not selected for 2 others. But he was back to playing for his club team by July 2022. So whatever injury it was doesn't really factor in here. And 4 in 13 games would not normally have us putting someone as a likely candidate, but he is a big name for Croatia. So that kind of maybe upped him 1 spot there. Dejan Lovren's been with Croatia since 2009 and has 71 caps and 5 goals and is 33 years old. He's with Zenit St. Petersburg in Russia, despite the political problems there and a lot of players leaving their Russian teams. He has stayed with his. Zenit St. Petersburg is pretty far north, though, so kind of away from the from the problem with Ukraine right now, and he's been with them since 2020. Prior to that, he was with Liverpool from 2014 to 20, and with Southampton in England, where Kaleta is now. And he also played for Lyon and Dynamo Zagreb, which was his youth club, as well as his first club. So Dejan Lovren's first tournament, despite getting his first cap in 2009, he didn't make the 2012 Euro Cup. He was on the preliminary squad, but didn't make the final cut. However, for the 2014 World Cup, he was a starter, started and finished all 3 games there. However, for the 2016 Euro Cup, he had some conflict, a falling out with manager that we talked about earlier, Ante Kasic, and didn't make the squad. He gave him an ultimatum, actually demanding a starting position, did Dejan Lovric, and the manager refused. So he didn't make the cup. However, with the new manager for the 2018 World Cup, he was selected and was a starter in that tournament too. So 2020 Euro Cup, though, he was just a substitute, not a substitute. He started and finished games 2 and 3, so kind of a starter. Again, a bit of a rotating position there, but he didn't appear in games 1 and 4. And he got 2 yellow cards in that cup. Pretty nasty fouls, as a matter of fact, but didn't get suspended. Okay, so Dejan Lovric, a likely candidate. And finally, in that category, we have Domagoj Vida. So he started 5 of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup and was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 6. So just 1 match that he wasn't selected for. So probably ahead of Lovren in the pecking order there, because Lovren was injured, so it's hard to know if he would have been selected as much. Domagoj Vida has been with Croatia since 2010 and is currently on 99 caps and has 4 goals. And he is 33 years old, and plays for AEK Athens in Greece. And prior to that was with Besiktas in Turkey and Dynamo Kiev in the Ukraine. And another with Dynamo Zagreb as well, although that wasn't his youth club. Osijek was. His first tournament was the Euro 2012. He was just a sub there, but and in the 2014 World Cup, he didn't see any action in the World Cup. But for 2016 Euro Cup, he was a starter as well as for the 2018 World Cup there, and he was actually excellent in the World Cup there with many crucial stops, as well as proving a bit of a threat on offense too, especially with headers. So he did score one of their goals. That was in qualifying, not in the cup itself. No, he did score in the cup itself too, on a header against Russia. Okay, so Domagoj Vida, a likely candidate. Now we move on to the 4 possible candidates. The first one is Josko Gvardiol, and actually he is coded as a central defender, but he played as a right defender in the Euro Cup, as we'll see soon. But I'll give you his recent history here. He started 5 of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup, and he was on the bench for 1, but not selected for 7, including the last 4 matches. So that kind of dropped him down to the possible category. He's been with the team since 2021. So a very new and young player, just 20 years old, but he does have 12 caps and 1 goal. So he plays for Leipzig in Germany, but he has been loaned actually to Dynamo Zagreb, which he played for beforehand. So that's where his club situation. And we said he was a starter in the Euro 2020 Cup. 2021 Cup, starting all 4 games there, but as I said, as a right defender rather than a central defender. So he has played some games as a central defender, which we'll see soon. Okay, I'm going to move Pongracic to a bit later and talk about Martin Ehrlich first. Martin Ehrlich is brand new to the squad. He got his first cap in June 2022 and started 3 of their 4 remaining games in those Nation League games and was on the bench for the other. So Martin Ehrlich making quick inroads into the team, 3 caps since 2022, and is 24 years old. And he plays for Sassuolo in Italy, and actually with Spezia in Italy before that. So a new player, as is Joseph Tutalo. Joseph Tutalo got his first appearance in June 2022. He was on the bench for the first one, but he started 2 of the 3 remaining games there and was on the bench for the first one, as I said. And he is 22 years old and plays for Dinamo Zagreb in Croatia, loaned to Istra 1961 also. So Dinamo Zagreb was his youth club as well. Of course, none of these players have any tournament experience under their belt, which is why on the YouTube graphic their name is in light grey. Marin Pongracic returned actually after 11-month absence in October 2021 to start 3 of their remaining 10 games, and he was on the bench for 4, but not selected for 3 matches. So he's been around a bit longer than the other 2. And he has been with Croatia since 2020, but only has 5 caps in that time. He is 25 years old and plays for Wolfsburg in Germany, currently on loan, though, to Lecce in Italy. And he was also loaned to Borussia Dortmund in 2021 and 22. Prior to Wolfsburg, he was with Red Bull Salzburg in Austria. But his whole career has been in Germany. He may have been born in Germany. I should check into that. But judging by his youth career, he's always played his soccer in Germany. So Marin Pongracic, the last of the possible candidates. And finally, we have Mile Skoric. So Mile Skoric didn't start any of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup, but he was subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 5. However, he wasn't selected for the last 4 matches. So Mile Skoric has been with Croatia since 2017, but just 7 caps in that time, and he's 31 years old. So he plays for Osijek in Croatia. That's his second spell with them. He wasn't selected for the 2018 World Cup, but was for the 2020 Euro Cup, but he was just on the bench and saw no action. So possible, but unlikely there. Let's finish this section by summarizing the position of centre back. So there are 2, as we saw, but they did try a 3-man defense in the friendlies, and some of the new players we saw here were playing in those friendlies. In the cup, it was always Vida, and he was paired with Kaletakar twice and Lovren twice. And in the following World Cup qualification games, those 3 rotated in the first half of the World Cup qualification games. But in the second half, the right defender Gvardiol, he is a central defender, but we saw him as the right defender in the cup. Anyway, Gvardiol came in and was a starter in the last 4 games, rotating with each of those players, the standard players, Vida, Kaletakar, and Lovren. And then it kind of blew up after that. Kaletakar is the only one who appeared in either the friendlies or the Nations League games. And it was a bunch of new players, too many to go through. Some of the ones we've talked about here, but some different names too. in the friendlies, and then an entirely different set of new players in the Nations League. However, those Nations League players were the ones that we talked about here. So Kaletakar appeared in one of the Nations League games, but it was the new players, Enrich and Sutalo, who emerged as the pairing in the last two games. So interesting to see those veterans kind of disappearing. Kaletakar not so much a veteran as the others, and these new players coming in. So I'm really curious to see what they'll go with in the friendlies prior to the Cup and in the Cup itself. Let's move on now to left backs, and we have, we're going to start with Ivan Strinic, a kind of a veteran who is off the squad now, but his absence kind of leaves a hole, and we'll just look at the players who are potentials to fill that hole. So we have Borna Sosa only as a possible candidate, though, and Borna Barisic also as a possible candidate, and then two players who seem to be off the squad, but are still enough in the picture that we kind of list them here. So an outside chance of coming back, and that's Domagoj Bradaric and Dario Melniak. So let's go back and just look at the situation beforehand with Ivan Strinic. And again, we won't go into too much detail, but he was a starter in the Euro 2012, 2016, and the World Cup 2018, and probably would have been in the World Cup 2014, except that he was injured for that tournament. So 2018, as we saw in 2020, it was central defender Josko Gvardiol who filled the role, but again, kind of playing out of position, it seems. And he hasn't played as the right back since the beginning of World Cup qualification. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead, summarizing the position a little bit. Anyway, Ivan Strinic leaving a hole that they still seem to be struggling to fill. Well, the candidates we have coded as left backs are Borna Sosa, so we'll begin with him. He got his first cap in September 2021 and started 6 of their remaining 13 games and was on the bench for 4. However, he was not selected for the last 3 matches. So he's a new player since after the Euro Cup there, since 2021, and has 8 caps and 1 goal, and is 24 years old. And he plays for Stuttgart in Germany, having moved from Dinamo Zagreb, which was his youth club and his first club. He actually was considered for the World Cup in 2018, selected for the 32-man preliminary squad there, but he didn't make the final cut. And also was not part of the Euro Cup in 2020. So he's been around, but is basically a new player as far as tournaments go. Borna Barisic started 4 of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup, and he was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 5. And not selected for 3 matches, including the last 2 matches. So it looks like they were looking to these players to fill the position, but certainly in the last games there in June, they dropped off the squad. So anyway, let's move on. Oh, and by the way, Borna Barisic, I didn't finish him. He's been with the team since 2017 and has 27 caps and 1 goal, and is 30 years old. But despite not playing the last 2 matches, I consider him the most likely candidate in a position that they're struggling to fill. Barisic plays for Rangers in Scotland since 2018, and with Croatian teams prior to that, several of them. And he also made the preliminary squad for the 2018 World Cup, but didn't make the final cut. But he was selected for the Euro 2020, but he was a substitute, appearing only in Game 3 as a substitute there. Okay, we have two candidates who seem to be off the squad. Sorry, just give me a moment to organize myself here. Okay, and the first one is Domagoj Bradaric, and he last appeared for the national team in the 2021 Euro Cup. So 2020 was the only year that he actually earned any caps for the team. He got 4 caps for Croatia. Still probably a candidate because he's just 23 years old, but off the team for the time being. He plays for Salernitana in Italy since 2022 and was with Lille in France before that, and Hajduk Split in Croatia before that. And he was selected for the Euro 2020, but he didn't see any action in that tournament. In fact, he wasn't even on the bench for game 3 there. So Domagoj Bradaric, a young player, and we may see him come back in the future, but kind of came and went there. And Dario Melniak last appeared for the national team in March 2021. So he earned 8 caps between 2019 and 21. He's 30 years old, but he's off the team now, and had never played in a tournament. Okay, so we have those candidates, and the 2 most likely candidates didn't play the last 2 games, so we'll see how they manage that. Gavardiol, as we saw, the central defender, played all games in the Cup, and then it was mostly Sosa in the early World Cup qualifying, but Barisic came in for 2 games there, and this position didn't exist for the friendlies if you think it was a 3-man defense. However, the normal left and right backs, or at least the left back, moved up to play left midfielder, so Barisic can be considered to have played the spot by being the left winger in one of the friendlies there. And Sosa and Barisic each played one of the Nations League games, but for the last 2 games where they were absent, it was the right defender Juranovic, who we'll meet soon, playing in the last 2 games. So whatever that means, whether they weren't satisfied with Sosa and Barisic and chose an out-of-position player, or perhaps Sosa and Barisic were unavailable for that game and Juranovic was just filling in. We'll have to wait and see for more evidence about that. But a pretty interesting situation there in the last 2 games, kind of drafting in a player out of position to play in that spot. And now we'll talk about that spot, the right back spot, and the main candidate there is Josip Juranovic, who we just met, playing as a left back for the last 2 games in June. And on that side, we also have Josip Stanisic as a likely candidate. And then we have an outgoing veteran, Sime Versalico, who is retired, but a bit of an interesting story there. So we'll come back to that. Okay, Josip Juranovic, in addition to playing those last 2 games as left defender, he's been the primary player on the right. So he started 10 of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup, and he was on the bench for 1 and not selected for 2. So Josip Juranovic has been with Croatia since 2017, and he has 21 caps and is 27 years old. Currently plays for Celtic in Scotland and was with Legia Warsaw in Poland before that, and Hajduk Split among several Croatian teams that he played for. Hajduk Split being the last one from 2015 to 20. He wasn't selected for the World Cup squad in 2018, and actually came back from a 3-year absence in 2019 and was selected for the Euro 2020. On the bench there for games 1 and 2, but gained a starting position for games 3 and 4 as the right back, and he's pretty much held down that position ever since. However, the recent development of him playing a left back kind of throws a spanner in the works there. But normally we'd say he is the spot on right back. However, Josip Stanisic did play quite a few games. He started three after his first cap in October 2021. He started three of their remaining 10 games. That's not quite a few, but just a few. He was subbed in for two and on the bench for one. For the other four games, he was playing with the under-21 team. He's 22 years old now. So 5 caps and 3 caps since 2021, and he was born in Germany and is actually with Bayern Munich in Germany now. So that's a big club affiliation for him, and he was actually with Bayern Munich's their second team and their youth team, Josip Stanisic. Okay, and he doesn't have any tournaments under his belt, being as young as he is. Finally, we have kind of the outgoing player in Sime Versalico, but he has played in the period that we talked about. In fact, he played the last of their 13 games since the 2020 Euro Cup, 2021 Euro Cup. And he was on the bench for 2 games beside, but he was injured during this period for 7 of the games. Interestingly, though, he played in the last game in June 2022, but then in August, he announced his retirement. So he's not a consideration for the squad here. And again, leaves a bit of a hole, because for the 2014 and 2018 World Cups, he was the starter there, and actually started in the 2020 Euro Cup too. However, he was lost his starting position in the cup, and as we saw, Juranovic took over. So that's the situation with Versalico. So a bit of a sudden exit there at the end, but of course he was kind of getting old. He's not as old as all that, 30 years old, but suddenly announced his retirement. So at the right back position, we have Versalico playing the first 2 games and Juranovic the last 2 in the Cup. So even as far back as the Euro Cup, we saw Juranovic kind of taking over the position. And then in World Cup qualifying, it was Juranovic all the way, although Stanisic came in for 2 of the games. The position didn't exist in the friendlies, as we saw on the left side, a 3-man defence. But just like on the left side, we saw the back moving up to a winger position. So Juranovic moved up to the right wing in one of those games. And in the Nations League games in June, it was Juranovic on the right in the first 2 games. But then we saw that Juranovic moved over to the left for the other 2 games. And Stanisic and Versalico each played one of the last 2 games, as if they were making kind of cameo appearances there. So again, a little tough to say what's going on at the left back and right back position, given those changes in the last couple of games. So we'll have to wait and see. Okay, that is the right back position, and we're going to move on to midfielders now. So we begin with defensive midfielders, but we're going to put them together with central midfielders because those positions overlap. As a defensive midfielder, we've actually moved Mateo Kovacic. His primary designation is as a defensive midfielder, but we've moved him to the right midfield because that's where he's played more of his games. So we'll talk about Christian Jakic, and we could actually move him up to attacking midfielder because he's played that a little bit more, but we'll stick with what we got here. We have him as a likely candidate, Christian Jakic. not necessarily, though, playing in central defence. And we also have Nicola Moro as possible, but unlikely. So those are the only two players we'll deal with here. And Christian Jakic got his first cap in October 2021 and started 2 of their remaining 10 games. He was subbed in for 2 besides and on the bench for 6 others. So that he's always called up is the reason we have him as a likely candidate, although he doesn't look likely as a starter. Christian Jakic has been with Croatia since 2021 and he has 4 caps and no goals, and he's 25 years old. He's playing for Eintracht Frankfurt in Germany since 2022. That's a new move, and was with Dinamo Zagreb in Croatia prior to that. But he was loaned to Eintracht Frankfurt in 2021 and 22. Prior to that, he played for teams in Croatia, including MK Lokomotiva, another of the big clubs there. He doesn't have any tournament experience, having earned his first cap after the Euro Cup, but has seemed to make good inroads into the team. Nicola Moro got his first appearance on the bench in September 2021, also after the Euro Cup there. He started 1 of their remaining 13 games and was on the bench for 4. However, he wasn't selected for 8 matches, including the last 4. So that put him down to possible, but unlikely. So he's brand new to the team since 2022 with just that 1 cap. And he's 24 years old and plays for Dynamo Moscow in Russia. So another player that didn't leave Russia. A lot of countries kind of insisted that their players leave Russia with that Ukraine situation. Oh, and sorry, I'm wrong. He did leave Russia because he's on loan to Bologna in Italy now. So so many players playing in Russia have actually left during this political crisis. Okay, and he was with Dinamo Zagreb before that move to Dynamo Moscow. So Nicola Mora, possible but unlikely candidate. And let's do central midfielders before we summarize this position. So we have Marcelo Brozovic. He's actually an attacking midfielder. That's his primary designation, but we've moved him back. We've moved a lot of Croatian players around really to put them more where they are playing rather than what their designation is. So Marcelo Brozovic, a definite candidate and really the primary central midfielder for them, as in the center of the midfield. Luka Modric fans were about to blow a gasket if I didn't clarify that. Okay, Luka Susic is a possible but unlikely candidate, and Milan Badel's a player who seems to be off the squad. So 3 candidates to look at here, and we'll begin with Marcelo Brozovic. So he started 11 of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup, and he was injured for the 2 others. So seems like one of the first on the squad list there. And he's been with the team since 2014 and has 76 caps and 7 goals and is 30 years old. He plays for Inter Milan in Italy and has done so since 2015. Moving over from Dinamo Zagreb, where we see so many of their players got their start. He actually didn't start with Dinamo Zagreb like some of the others. That wasn't his youth club. Okay, but he was selected for the 2014 World Cup and just appeared as a substitute there. But for the 2016 Euro Cup, he was a starter. Not so for the World Cup in 2018, more like a rotating position there because he started 4 of the games and subbed into 2 others, and then 1 game, the B game, he didn't appear in. Okay, and for the 2020 Euro Cup, he started all 4 games there. He got 2 yellow cards in that tournament, but avoided suspension. And Marcelo Brozovic, a definite candidate, as I say, usually playing in the center of the central midfield. Lukas Sucic is possible but unlikely. He got his first cap in October 2021 after the Euro Cup, but didn't start any of their remaining 9 games. He was just subbed in for 3 and on the bench for 2. For the other 4, he was with the under-21 team. And he's just 20 years old now. He doesn't have. Sorry, I kind of lost myself a bit there. He doesn't have any tournament experience, being as young as he is. Kind of looks like he came into the team. I think I have him as possible, but unlikely, because those teams, those games he wasn't selected for were towards the end. Otherwise, I probably would have put him as a possible candidate. But we'll see. There's a long future ahead for Sucic. Finally, Milan Badelj last appeared for the national team in the 2021 Euro Cup. So he was with Croatia from 2010 to 2021 and has 55 caps on his record. Now he's 33 years old, still playing club soccer with Genoa in Italy. Most of his clubs in recent times have been with in Italy, so Genoa, Lazio, and Fiorentina, and he also played for Hamburg in Germany. In terms of tournaments, he was on the roster for the 2012 Euro Cup and the 2014 World Cup, but he didn't see any actions in those tournaments. However, he was a starter in Euro 2016. But in the World Cup 2018 and 2020 Euro Cup, a bench player. So, never, or only for Euro 2016 did he kind of really get into the squad. Otherwise, he was kind of on the fringes and is now out of the picture, Milan Badelj. So I wouldn't say he's leaving a hole there, because he was only the starter in 2016. Okay, now we can summarize. And by the way, I should have said at the beginning, for those who are wondering why I haven't mentioned Luka Modric, he's coded as a central midfielder, but we moved him to the right midfield because he's kind of played on the right side of the central midfield, or as a right midfielder. So we're going to talk about him there. All right, so the position of defensive or central midfielder, it could be one player, or it could be 2, or it could be 3. But when it's 3, we tend to call them left and right midfielders. So think in terms of 1 or 2 for this discussion. When it was 1, it was Brozovic, despite being coded as an attacking midfielder. It was Brozovic. And when it was 2 central midfielders, it was Modric and Kovacic in one of the cup games. That was the only time it was two players. So throughout the World Cup qualifying, it was Brozovic, and when it was two central midfielders, he was paired with Kovacic. In the friendlies, Moro took a shot at the position, but anyway, I'll move on. Brozovic and Kovacic resumed their partnership in Nations League. However, Jakic replaced Kovacic once. Okay, so to summarize, when it's a single central midfielder, it tends to be Brozovic. Often it'll be Kovacic on the left side and Modric on the right side. When it's a 2-man central midfield, it's usually Kovacic kind of joining Brozovic in a pairing. Okay. So that is defensive and central midfielders. Let's move out to left midfielders. And when we talk about the position, this position, we're kind of thinking more a defensive left midfielder, although some of these players do move up and score goals even. But we'll begin with left midfielder, and the player in that position has been Mateo Kovacic. So we have him as a definite candidate. That's the only one we have here. as far as this goes, because they don't use a position much, as we saw. Sometimes it's just a two-man central midfield there. So Mateo Kovacic has started 8 of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup, and he was subbed in for 2, suspended for 1 actually, and injured for 2 others. So always called up when available, but hasn't always been available. He has been with Croatia since 2013, and in that time has an impressive 83 caps. And he's not a scorer, just 3 goals there, and just 28 years old, so still a few years left in him. He plays for Chelsea in England and has done so since 2019, moving over from Real Madrid, who he played for since 2015. He was actually loaned to Chelsea at the end of that spell, and prior to Real Madrid played for the top Italian team, Inter Milan, and he had moved over from Dinamo Zagreb, where he played his youth and first club team there. He was actually born in Austria, Mateo Kovacic, and Inter Milan paid 15 million euros for him when he was just 18 years old. So kind of has always looked a promising player. He was a starter in the World Cup in 2014, but he actually did lose his starting position in that cup and was just a substitute in the 2016 Euro Cup. So as far as the national team goes, he kind of got off to a sputtering start. Even in the 2018 World Cup, he was just a starter in the B team game, otherwise just a substitute, although he did come into 5 of the games as a 4 of the games as a substitute, sorry. And in Euro 2020, he was a starter. So, yeah, seems to finally be coming into his own as far as the Croatia team goes as a starter in the 2020 Euro Cup there, and has been fairly regular in the central midfield on the left side of it ever since. So we'll actually summarize this position, left midfielder. In terms of a kind of a defensive left midfielder, it's only used in the 4-3-3 formation. And it was Kovacic in the Cup and Kovacic in World Cup qualifying as well. Although Pasalic, who we'll meet a bit later, did replace him in the last 2 games. However, Kovacic resumed the position in friendlies and in the Nations League games in June. Okay, finally, fans of Luka Modric, you have what you were waiting for. We moved Luka Modric over to the discussion of right midfielders, and we have him there as a definite candidate. And actually, he's the only one we have there. We've kind of divided midfielders a bit more specifically for Croatia. So other players actually coded as midfielders we'll meet later on. Luka Modric himself is coded as a central midfielder and secondarily as a defensive midfielder and tertiarily as a attacking midfielder, but yet we talk about him as a right midfielder here. He started 7 of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup, and he was subbed in for 3 and was injured for 3, but those were the first 3 matches following the Euro Cup. So Luka Modric is the captain of the team. He's been with Croatia since 2006 and has 154 caps and 23 goals. So Luka Modric, but he is 37 years old, so getting up there in age. He's recently reached his 10-year mark with Real Madrid in Spain. Can't say there's a lot of players who do that. And prior to that was with Tottenham in England for 4 years, and with, you guessed it, Dinamo Zagreb in Croatia before that. That was his youth club as well. Okay, well, he was part of the squad for the 2006 World Cup. He was just a substitute at that point, but even by the 2008 Euro Cup, he was a starter, and all the way through for all of their tournaments, a starter. By the 2018 World Cup, he was a captain, He was the captain of the team and started all the games there. And he did miss a penalty in that tournament, which would have ended a game in extra time. It was against against Denmark. Yes, I remember it. Denmark hold a player down who was racing towards the net. So it looked like that Croatia would win the game on that penalty, but he missed it. He did show good courage in stepping up for another penalty in the penalty shootout, but they did lose that game. He was awarded, Luka Modric, the Golden Ball Award as best player of the tournament for the 2018 World Cup. So quite an honour there. And he was around too for the 2020 Euro Cup as the captain and starter in that, continuing to make some beautiful passes and beautiful plays. Not as influential in the 2020 Euro Cup, though, as his age does seem to be starting to show. Nevertheless, a definite candidate for this one, and probably on the kind of right defensive midfielder role for Luka Modric. So again, to summarize the role itself, right midfield was only used in the 4-3-3 formation. Otherwise, we'll talk about right attacking midfielders or right wingers. And almost always it's Modric playing in this position. And Pasalic actually did play there once, the kind of roving midfielder Pasalic, once in World Cup qualifying. Okay, well, we're going to move on to left and right wingers, but there are no players. There are players coded, which we'll mention in a little while, but let's just talk about the position so that you understand why we've moved players from this designation. So left wingers are rarely used. If you think about it, only in the 4-1-4-1 formation, or in the 3-5-2 formation, which they used once in friendlies. Only in those kind of formations are there wingers. But in the two formations that Croatia like, the 4-3-3 and the 4-2-3-1, there really are no wingers. In the 4-2-3-1, we consider the three midfielders, we consider those attacking midfielders rather than wingers. So the few times that they have used the position of winger, it's been a right back or a left back moving up into the position. So on the left side, Barisic moved up once, and just once the back moved up. Otherwise, it's basically an attacking midfielder player. So Perisic has played the position of left wing 2 of the 3 times that they've used it. On the right wing, it was left back Juranovic coming up from the right back position to play right winger in the one game during World Cup qualifying where they had a winger, and in the friendlies it was attacking midfielders Orsic and Ivanusic, which we will meet shortly. Okay, and just to make clear, there are a couple of players designated as left wingers or coded as left wingers. Josip Brekalo is coded as a left winger, but we've moved him to left attacking midfielder / left forward. And also on the left wing, Mislav Orsic, who we just mentioned, as playing left wing one time, but more often plays as an attacking midfielder, either on the right or on the left. So we've moved him to an attacking midfielder to the discussion there. And that's what we're going to move on to here. So really, we've moved all the candidates out of left and right wing to attacking midfielder, and that moves us on to forwards, where we include attacking midfielders. And for Croatia here, we are going to add left and right attacking midfielders, since they often play in that 4-3-3. So it could be a 4-2-3-1, it'll be a left and right attacking midfielder, and a 4-3-3, a left and right forward. So we'll cover those in the same discussion. But we begin with generally attacking midfielders, and we're going to talk about definite candidate Mario Pasalic. Plays in various positions actually, but usually in a more attacking role, especially a central attacking midfielder when they use a formation with that position. And the player we just mentioned, Mislav Orsic, also a definite candidate, and those are the only two we have there. So let's talk about them. And Mario Pasalic started 10 of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup and was subbed in for the other 3. So not only always called up, but always used as well. And he has been with Croatia since 2014 and has 42 caps and 7 goals and is 27 years old. So he's currently with Atalanta in Italy and played for Chelsea in England from 2014 to 20, but was actually loaned out quite a bit in that time too. Atalanta was his final loan spell, but also Spartak Moscow, AC Milan, and Monaco, as well as Elche at the beginning, Elche in Spain. He came from the Croatian club Hajduk Split, which was his first club as well as his youth club there. And his first tournament, despite being getting his first cap in 2014, his first tournament was the Euro 2020. So actually made the preliminary squad for the 2014 World Cup all the way back then, and for the 2018 World Cup, but in both cases didn't make the cut down to 24. So I don't know if I mentioned he was born in Germany, but the German-born Croatian was a substitute in the 2020 Euro Cup. So, yeah, despite his 42 caps, has never really inserted himself into the team, but seems to be doing so recently with all of those stars. So Mario Pasalic, a definite candidate. And Mislav Orsic, again coded as a left winger, but played left attacking midfielder twice and right attacking midfielder once. That makes up his 3 starts in 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup. Besides that, he was subbed in for 6 and on the bench for 2. And the only 2 he missed was games he was injured for. So always called up there, Mislav Orsic. And he has been with Croatia since 2019 and has 20 caps and 1 goal. He's 30 years old. Currently playing for Dynamo Zagreb in Croatia, as so many do. But prior to that, I actually played in the Far East with Ulsan Hyundai in South Korea and Changchun Yatai and Junan Dragons. Junan Dragons in South Korea also. Sorry, Changchun Yatai is in China. And prior to that was with clubs either in Croatia or Slovenia. Oh, he also played for a club in Italy. Anyway, Mislav Orsic had his first tournament in the Euro 2020. He appeared only in game 4 there as a substitute and played very well in that short time. I might add, a great cross and very influential in extra time of game 4. Yeah, since has appeared as a starter for the squad in the period we're talking about. So again, definite to make the squad, but that doesn't necessarily mean he'll be a starter. So let's talk about the position of attacking midfield in general as a summary. And again, the position is only used when they use that 4-2-3-1 formation. Otherwise, in the 4-3-3, we consider a central midfielder in the middle. And it was actually Kramaric the one time they used it in the cup. So the forward Kramaric we will meet soon. And Vlasic and Pasalic once each in World Cup qualifying. Actually, Jakic was there in a friendly game, but Pasalic was there twice. Both times they used the formation in June for the Nations League games. So it seems the kind of starting central attacking midfielder if they use one. Otherwise, we'll play in other positions. Okay, let's move on to left attacking midfielders and left forwards, kind of a new category that we've created for Croatia here. And in this position, we have Ivan Perisic. He's coded as a left midfielder, but we saw him playing left winger twice, and left attacking midfielder or left forward quite often. Ivan Perisic, then a definite candidate. We also have Josip Brekalo. He is also coded as a left winger, we noted there, but we've moved him to here. And let's take a look at these players. So Ivan Perisic is a veteran. He's been with the team since 2011. Yikes, I'm supposed to do his recent participation first, so I'll go back and start with that. He started 8 of their 13 games since the Euro 2021 Cup, and he was subbed in for 2. But he was injured for the last 4 matches. We don't need to deal with that in injuries, though, because by August of this year, he was back in action, so it doesn't threaten his World Cup appearance. Ivan Perisic, then, as I started to say, was got his first cap in 2011 and has an impressive 115 caps with 32 goals, and he's 32 years old. He's recently moved to Tottenham in England, but was with Inter Milan in Italy for quite a while, from 2015 to 22. He even got a loan spell with Bayern Munich in the middle of that, and was with other clubs in Germany before 2015, Wolfsburg and Dortmund, Borussia Dortmund there. So a well-traveled player, also has played in France and Belgium, and Hajduk Split is actually his youth club that he came out of. So Ivan Perisic, his first tournament was the 2012 Euro Cup, where he was a starter, and then a starter in all cups, including the 2014 and 2018 World Cups. He had an excellent tournament there in 2018. Especially in their game against England. And he was a starter also in the 2020 Euro Cup, where he scored 2 of their 7 goals there. And so a big player for Croatia, but kind of getting up there in age, 33 years old. And nevertheless, we fully expect to see him at the Cup here. Josip Brekalo is a, sorry, I should say where they're at. So a likely candidate, and Perisic a definite candidate. And Josip Brekalo started 3, and in fact 3 of the last 4 of their 13 games since the Euro Cup. And he was subbed in for 3 and on the bench for 1. He was also out for a few games, one with coronavirus and 2 for injury, and not selected actually for the first 3 matches after the Euro Cup. Josip Brekalo has been with Croatia since 2018 and has 33 caps and 4 goals, and he is 24 years old. So he's currently with Wolfsburg in Germany since 2016, but recently was loaned to Torino. He's finished that loan spell time, and was loaned to Stuttgart too, actually, at the beginning of his time with Wolfsburg. Another player coming out of Dinamo Zagreb, where he spent his youth club years. So his first tournament was the 2020 Euro Cup. There he started game 2, but otherwise was a substitute coming into a couple of games, and he scored 1 of their goals in qualifying for this cup. So Josip Brekalo, a likely candidate. And we'll go over the position of left attacking midfield and left forward. So in the cup, it was Perisic twice and Brekalo once, and also Ante Rebic once, the forward who we'll talk about soon, all lining up as kind of a left attacker. In World Cup qualifying, it was Perisic all the way, basically. And he also played it in friendlies. Orsic came in once. We put Orsic as an attacking midfielder. Brekalo, though, kind of took over in the Nations League games, but that was because Ivan Perisic was injured. So Brekalo played it 3 times and Orsic once. It'll be interesting to see. I imagine Perisic will resume the position now that he's back to health. Okay, next is right attacking midfielders. And here we have two likely candidates. And they are Luka Ivanusic, who we saw playing on the right wing one time. And we also have Lovro Majer. Sorry, I just got to copy these names into the graphic there. Okay, and both of them are likely candidates. Oops, it looks like I've made a mistake because there was a definite candidate that I missed. And Nikola Vlasic, a definite candidate. So we have three players, and we'll begin by talking about Nikola Vlasic. He started 6 of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup, and for the other 7, he was subbed in every time, so always on the field for them. And Nikola Vlasic has been with Croatia since 2017, has 41 caps and 7 goals, and is 25 years old. Currently playing with West Ham in England, but he's actually out on loan to Torino since 2022. Prior to West Ham, he was with CSKA Moscow in Russia from 2019, and he was in Everton with Everton from England before that. He came out of Hajduk Split in Croatia, his youth club and first club there. And despite his first cap in 2017, he wasn't considered for the 2018 World Cup, but was on the bench for the 2020 Euro Cup, at least for games 1 and 2, but gained a starting position after that. Niko Vlasic. Okay, next is the likely candidate Luka Ivanusic. He started 3 of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup and was subbed in for 3 and on the bench for 4. He was injured for 2, so only 1 game that he wasn't called up for. And he has been with Croatia since 2017, but only 11 caps and 1 goal in that time. Yet he is still young at 24 years old, so quite a bit of time left for him. He's with Dinamo Zagreb in Croatia and seems to be one of the only players who has only played in Croatia. He played for MK Lokomotiva as well. And again, just like Vlasic, despite his first cap in 2017, was not selected for the World Cup in 2018 and was a substitute in the 2020 Euro Cup there. Finally, we have Lovro Majer. So he returned actually after a more than 4-year absence in September 2021 and started 4 of their remaining 13 games and was subbed in for 3 and on the bench for 4. However, he was not selected for 2 matches there, so likely candidate, seems to be called up regularly. And like the other 2, his first cap was in 2017. And he has now 11 caps and 3 goals and is 24 years old. So a very similar bio as far as the national team goes for all of these 3 players, including the fact that he wasn't selected for the 2018 World Cup. However, unlike the other 2, Lovro Majer was also not selected for the 2020 Euro Cup, not even a consideration actually, because he was off the squad for 4 years during that period, but came back in September 2021 and scored 2 of their goals, both against Malta in the qualifying. So those 3 players, we expect to see all of them at the Cup. And to summarize the position of right attacking midfielder / right forward, we have the forward Kramaric playing the role in the Cup, and then Vlasic twice in the Cup, and in World Cup qualifying games. Ivanusic joined that rotation during World Cup qualifying, and Majer also played the position once. In the Nations League, though, it's been Majer and Ivanusic playing the role. Okay, and we move on to our last category, which is forwards. And introducing the candidates, we're actually going to start with a player who's off the squad, retired, but has left a gap. So we don't cover all retired players, but just those who seem to have left a gap. Mario Mandzukic as their forward. And I'll just dispense with him now without going into too much detail. He's actually retired from soccer. His last team was AC Milan in 2021. And he was the starting forward in the Euro 2016, World Cup 2018. But ever since that time, they've been kind of trying to find a starting forward to replace him. So the candidates we'll talk about next seem to be the options they have. And the first one is definite candidate Andrej Kramaric, but we have seen already that he doesn't always start as the centre forward. Ante Budimir is a likely candidate. And then Marko Livaja as a possible candidate, along with Bruno Petkovic. And as possible but unlikely, we have Petar Musa, and seemingly off the squad, Antonio Kolak, and Ante Rebic. They're seemingly off the squad. And we talked about Mario Mandzukic, who is now retired. But I'll just say Mario Mandzukic announced his retirement fairly quickly after the World Cup in August 2018 there. So Andrej Kramaric, probably the main candidate to replace him. And he started 9 of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup and was subbed in for 4 others. And he has been with the team since 2014 and has 73 caps and 19 goals. And he's 31 years old. So he has been with Hoffenheim in Germany since 2016 and was with Leicester in 2015 and 16, on loan to Hoffenheim at the end of that period. And prior to that, played for clubs in Croatia, including Rijeka and, you guessed, Dinamo Zagreb. That was his youth club from 6 years of age, I might add. Andrej Kramaric was part of the squad in 2016, but just subbed in to a few games there. In the 2018 World Cup, he appeared in all 7 games, kind of a rotating starter there, starting games 1, 3, and 5, and subbing into the other games in that 2018 World Cup. He was a starter also for the 2020 Euro Cup and scored 2 of their goals in qualifying in the lead up to this cup. So we'll see when we review the position that he doesn't seem a fully satisfactory starter. Again, just 2 goals of their 21 in qualifying there. So they seem to be still searching for the right person. Ante Budimir is a likely candidate. He returned after a 9-month absence, so he missed the period after the Euro Cup. Returned in March 2022 and started 4 of their remaining 6 games, subbing in for the others. So Ante Budimir has been with Croatia since 2020 and has 15 caps and 1 goal. He's not new, though. He's new to Croatia, but not young. He's 31 years old. Currently plays for Osasuna in Spain and was with Mallorca before them, and various clubs in Italy and Germany and Croatia as well. So in the 2020 Euro Cup, he appeared only in Game 4 when he was subbed in at 79 minutes. But he did assist a goal in that tournament. So Ante Budimir has been playing recent games, so we consider him a likely candidate, especially kind of given the lack of candidates in this position. Marko Livaja returned after an almost 3-year absence in September 2021, and he started 2 of their remaining 9 games, but he wasn't selected for any of the last 4 matches. So He got his first cap in 2018 and then was basically off the squad. In all, he has 14 caps and 3 goals and is 28 years old. And he plays for Hajduk Split in Croatia and did play for AEK Athens prior to that, but no tournaments under his belt. He also scored 2 of their goals in qualifying. And Bruno Petkovic started none of their games since the 2021 Euro Cup, but he was subbed in for 2 and not selected for 11 others, including the last 6 matches. So I don't know why I have him as a possible candidate, because really he is possible but unlikely, having missed those matches. So I'm just going to move him down there. Bruno Petkovic has been with Croatia since 2019 and has 22 caps and 6 goals. He's 28 years old and plays for Dinamo Zagreb in Croatia since 2019, but was playing outside the country, mostly in Italy, actually just solely in Italy, with Bologna and Hellas Verona and a few other teams there. So he was selected for the 2020 Euro Cup, and he started game 3 there, but otherwise was a substitute. So we consider him a substitute for that tournament. And he did score 4 of their 17 goals in qualifying for the Euro Cup there in 2020. So he was the top scorer for Croatia, but he certainly dropped off since then, and looks like an unlikely candidate to even reach the cup here. Petar Musa, also unlikely. Actually, one of my sources had him on the bench for a game in June 2022, but another source didn't report it, so I'm not sure if he's really there. He doesn't have any caps for Croatia. He's 24 years old. In his favor is his club affiliation. He plays for Benfica in Portugal since 2022. Prior to that, he was with Slavia Prague in the Czech Republic. So it'll be interesting to see if he pops up in the games in September and prior to the World Cup. And we also have Antonio Kolak as one of the players who seems to be off the squad now. He started 1 of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup, and he was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 1. But those were early, kind of immediately after the Cup, and he wasn't selected for the last 10 matches. So he's 28 years old and plays for Rangers in Scotland and has never been involved in a tournament. So we'll maybe get more details on him if he shows up in the upcoming games. Finally, we have Ante Rebic. He last appeared for the team in the 2021 Euro Cup. So actually a bit of a loss there in the forward line too. Ante Rebic have been with Croatia since 2013, and he has 42 caps and 3 goals in that time. So not a fierce scorer there, with an under 10% ratio. He is 29 years old and plays for AC Milan in Italy. Prior to that, he was with Eintracht Frankfurt in Germany and Fiorentina in Italy. So he has a fairly good club record there. Also played for Leipzig, actually on loan with Leipzig in Germany too. And he's kind of been around for quite a while. He was a substitute in the 2014 World Cup. He got a red card in game 3 there for a dangerous tackle. And he wasn't part of the squad for the 2016 Euro Cup. However, for the 2018 World Cup, he was a starter and finished all 7 games except for the B team game there. Started all 7 games, but didn't, was usually subbed out of them actually. And he scored a goal in that cup. And in the 2020 Euro Cup, he started all 4 games except for game 3 there, and didn't score any goals, and actually had a fairly poor tournament there, missing the opportunities that came his way. So Ante Rebic has not seen even the bench since that 2021 Euro Cup. but I still think has an outside chance of coming in, again, because they have a bit of a lack of forwards. So we'll just summarize the position here. So after Mario Mandzukic left, there's been a bit of a hole, and it was Rebic twice in the Euro Cup and Petkovic twice. So not Kramaric, who was lining up, I think, as a left attacking midfielder there. And early in World Cup qualifying, they seem to be searching for a player. So Kolac and Sedko each got a tryout, but they eventually settled on Kramaric kind of halfway through qualifying. And since then, it's been Kramaric with Budimir increasingly coming in at the end and ultimately alternating in the position in the Nations League games. So that is the situation as forward, and we're finished with the player-by-player run through, and we'll move on to a discussion of the squad. And I suppose I should explain the weird shirt that I'm wearing. I was just looking for the closest thing that I could find to the white and red checkers of Croatia. So sorry for Croatian fans if this is a bit of a distant approximation of it, but the problem could always be solved by some beloved Croatian fans sending a shirt my way, because I have a bit of poverty of international shirts. I'm working on it. And hopefully in future podcasts, I'll be a bit more accurate in wearing the shirt of the nation that I'm covering. Anyway, let's go back to some of the notes we had. So we introduced a few at the beginning. Some of them were team notes and some of them were more squad notes. So I'll dispense with the team notes quickly here. We talked about was 2018 just good fortune, and I won't repeat all that. But one thing we did note that it was kind of consistent with Yugoslavia, the former Yugoslavia's intermittent success. So Croatia more than Serbia kind of repeating their record of sometimes rising up to the semi-finals and then sometimes not making the cup or just reaching the group stage. But one of the main questions we had with Croatia was, is it an aging squad? And having gone through the player-by-player section of the podcast, we can talk about it more in more concrete terms. So certainly their biggest names and the ones that stood out in the 2018 World Cup are aging, some of them having retired already. We'll review those players leaving the squad soon. However, that could be said of most nations, that their biggest names are their older players. And we saw in the player-by-player also that they have brought in a lot of youth. So the question really becomes whether that youth, those younger players, will reach the height of the veterans, especially in the 2018 World Cup. And in a sense, that leads us to the last question that came out of previous podcasts: is in this World Cup, is Croatia kind of battling with Belgium for first place, or perhaps comfortably finishing second above Morocco and Canada, or will they find themselves embroiled in a battle with Morocco and or Canada, and have to fight for second place and perhaps not even make second place? So most kind of superficial viewers are looking at Belgium and Croatia as the clear winners of the cup, with Morocco and Canada just happy to be there. But in our podcast, we thought it would be not so easy, and that Morocco and Canada could provide a challenge. We'll see. Let's talk about Croatia's club affiliations. And some of the players were with bigger clubs and have kind of, because of their aging, kind of moved either back to Croatia or down to smaller clubs. But we still have players with some pretty big clubs. So goalkeeper Ivo Grbić is with Atletico Madrid. And these are younger players, Josip Stanisic with Bayern Munich. those are kind of the elite clubs. Kovacic is with Chelsea and Modric still with Real Madrid and Brozovic with Inter Milan. Tottenham Hotspur, Ivan Perisic has just moved there and moving from even bigger clubs still. And then we have a number of players at kind of secondary but good clubs like Wolfsburg, Southampton in England, Celtic, AEK Athens, Stuttgart, kind of at that level. So I would say about a third of their players are playing in Croatia, and Dinamo Zagreb, kind of the team that seemed to pop up again and again. And they have 4 players with Dinamo Zagreb, actually 5. And then a couple of others like Hajduk Split and Rijeka, among the bigger clubs in Croatia, Osijek as well. So pretty good club affiliation there. And let's move on to the next part, which is a bit of a number crunch on the team here. So all the way through these podcasts, I've been saying players called up since 2020, but it's actually I'm considering players called up since 2021, and how many players do they kind of have on the slate as options before them. Now, of course, some of those players have drifted off the team for quite a while, but it's a good measure. It kind of compares, how many options they have available to them. Well, as far as Croatia goes, it is 43 players, and that is quite a bit lower than most teams. The average is 49.6, so 49 or 50 players that have played for them over the past 2 years, roughly. And Croatia have kept it fairly small. It doesn't necessarily mean anything. In some cases, it might mean a lack of players that they have options for. I would say that's only true for Croatia in the forward position, a bit of a lack of options, but otherwise not really a problem. We have the next one, total players under more serious consideration. So these would be the players we'd listed as definite, likely, or possible in the player-by-player podcast. And Croatia has 32. Actually, I'm finding most teams are pretty similar as far as this goes. And the average is 33, so not much to delve into there. And this other stat, which I'll try to improve in future contracts, future podcasts or future mediacast. How many definite and likely are there? So for Croatia, there's 23. The average is 21. So they seem a bit more stable in the squad than some squads, kind of having decided on most of the players they would bring to the cup. And if we just think in terms of let's say they fill 23 positions, maybe 1 or 2 less if injuries play a role or if players are not called up in September, but we'll say roughly 23. And they have 32 players to fill those 3 spots because they bring 26 to the cup. So we'll see a couple of those possible players making the cup, and there's always room for players who suddenly come into good form or what have you. So things looking pretty much on path. So no big headaches to deal with for Croatia. And we're going to see they don't have a lot of injury problems either. Now, something we've made a lot of in the podcasts for the team is the average age of the team. So I've always found 25 to 27 is the average age, but I am finding teams in this World Cup a bit older. And here I'm looking at the definite, likely, and possible players. 26.8 is the average, and 27 is what Croatia's average age is. So it's actually just slightly above average. But let's break it down a bit. We see that their veterans, those players who came out of the 2018 World Cup are in their 30s now. But in fact, there's only 6 of them Luka Modric is by far the oldest at 37, and then we have 3 players at 33, but they are big players, Lovren, Vida, and Perisic, and then 2 players at 31, Kramaric and Budimir. So actually, you know, maybe not as old as we've been making out on the whole. It's just that the veteran players, and we're going to see some who have retired, did age out. On the other hand, they have brought quite a bit of youth into the team. So just one 20-year-old, but players between 22 and 24, they have 9. So basically, we'll say 10 players who are under 24. So we did say in the podcast that they were doing a fairly good job rejuvenating, and this kind of shows it. Again, the question is whether those newcomers are of the same quality as the outgoing players, but only time will tell. As far as average caps goes, it's 34.4. So again, some of those senior players have a tremendous amount of caps, and so on the whole, they have 5 more than the average, which is 29.5. So a fairly experienced team, and because they're small in terms of the total number of players who have been starting, they probably play together quite well. Familiar with each other because they don't have a lot of players coming and going. Total goals is 130, which is kind of a meaningless statistic unless we put it in context, but those are the total goals of the definite, likely, and possible players. Overall, it's 130, which is actually lower than other teams, but we need to put it into context, and I've developed a new statistic. Average goals per cap, and for Croatia that's 12.6%. The average is 13.7%. So among the teams I've done this for, which is let me just see how many teams I've run this statistic for, 22 teams so far. They are one of the lowest, actually. We've talked about Australia struggling for goals. Australia is 12.5%. And basically any team around that percentage, we've mentioned kind of goals as a problem. And yeah, so goals are a problem, and that kind of fits with what we saw with them looking for a kind of a centre forward. Kramaric seems the main candidate, but he only has 2 goals in qualifying. But perhaps I've been a bit hasty there with Kramaric, because overall he has 19 goals in 73 games, which is a fairly respectable 26%. And the only player higher than him is actually Ivan Perisic with 28%, 32 goals in 115 games there. And sorry, I missed... surprisingly, Lovro Majer, the midfielder who has, 3 goals in 10 games, 30%. It is a higher percentage, but maybe not enough games to really make any big claims, there. So we'll kind of focus on players who have played, say, 15 or more games for this statistic. Luka Modric is at 15%. Nikola Vlasic 17, and Mario Pasalic also around 15%. So one thing I can say is that they do kind of have scorers all over the field. However, even 26% for Kramaric as the player that they're considering as a centre forward is a little bit low, especially in context of their overall struggles to find a centre forward. So scoring a bit of a problem for Croatia here, and we'll see how that plays out in the cup. Let's look at some of the issues then. So in defence, we have Livakovic, Ivusic, or is it a rotation of the players there, of the goalkeepers? So recently, in recent games, it's been a rotation of Livakovic and Ivusic. But if we have to pick one, well, I'll let you know that when we do our starters. Maybe one of the bigger issues on the squad is are they going with the old or the new central defense? So we saw that Kaletakar, Lovren, and Vida were the kind of the rotation of starters in the first half of the period we're talking about, including the Euro Cup. And then Gavardiol came into the picture kind of halfway through World Cup qualifying. However, they underwent a really huge change in the friendlies and Nations League games towards the end of 2020, or towards the end of the period in March and June 2022, and ended up trying out all sorts of names, but emerging with Enrich and Sutalo as the main pairing at the end of Nations League. So it'll be, the question is, who will it be in the Cup? Basically the veterans. Kaletakar is not so as old as Lovren and Vida, or will it be these new players coming in, Enrich and Sutalo? I'm anxious to kind of see what they do in friendlies in September. All right, for left defense, again, is it Sosa? Is it Barisic, or is it neither for left defense? Because in the last two games, we saw right defender Juranovic coming over into the position. So it makes me wonder whether the manager's not satisfied with Sosa or Barisic in the position. On as a right back, well, I said, will it be Versalico or Stanisic? They both returned to the right back position when Juranovic moved over. So it was steadily Juranovic until the last two games. And then these two players stepped in. Well, we know it won't be Versalico because, sorry, I'm not really sure how to pronounce that name. Because even though he started the last game in June, he announced his retirement in August. So it wouldn't be him. It might be Stanisic playing on the right and Juranovic moving over to the left. Juranovic, I should say. Again, the friendlies in September may shed some light on that. In the midfield, there's not much to talk about. Steady selection of starters there. Real veterans in the midfield: Modric and Brozovic and Kalinic. Okay, I just have the feeling I'm saying his name wrong. Anyway, on the attack, we basically have problem scoring goals, or a bit of a problem scoring goals. Not enough goals really for Croatia. So as a left attacker, is it going to be Perisic or Brekalo? Well, basically, Brekalo did play in the position a few times along with a couple of other players, but really 3 out of 4 times in June was replacing Perisic, who was injured. So I'm tempted to say that Perisic will come back into the position. In fact, I'm pretty sure of it. Ivanusic or Majer, or a rotation as right attacker. These two have been kind of rotating in the position. Will they nail it down to one? Or it seems like rotation of players is becoming more popular, so it might be both of them. And the situation is similar up front with Kramaric or Budimir. It could be both of them playing as centre forward, because they sometimes do go with two centre forwards. Kramaric seems to have the edge here. Again, it could be a rotation, but again, they don't fully seem satisfied with Kramaric as the centre forward, because in the Euro Cup and in the first few games they were trying out other players. And the sheer number of centre forwards is a bit lower than most teams bring to the Cup. Anyway, those are some of the issues. Let's move on to new players. So actually, more than most teams, Croatia's new players are making inroads into the squad. So we have 4 of them at the likely level, and then 6 of them at the possible level. So we went over these players in the player by player, so we'll really just mention them by name here. So goalkeeper Ivica Ivucevic. Ivucic is not young, actually. He's 27 years old, but he joined Croatia in 2021. So we can consider him a new player, and we consider him a likely candidate, probably the third string keeper there. Josip Stanisic, also likely. He's 22 years old and is with Bayern Munich in Germany. So kind of an exciting candidate as the right back there. If the regular right back moves over to the left, that would open the door for him a little bit. Christian Jakic hasn't started actually that many games, but is 25 years old. Again, not that young, but new to the squad in 2021. And plays for Eintracht Frankfurt in Germany. And he's listed as a defensive midfielder, but he's also played as an attacking midfielder too. Lovro Majer, he's 24 years old and is playing, I believe, on the right side there. He actually returned after an absence too of 4 years. So he got his first cap in 2017, but really wasn't part of the squad until this recent period, Lovro Majer. And now we have players who are at the kind of possible level. So I would imagine maybe half of these will make it. Ivo Grbic is a goalkeeper, and he's playing for Atletico Madrid in Spain. He, again, is not young, 26 years old, but first cap with Croatia was in 2021. Nedilko Labrovic, also a goalkeeper, and just came into the squad. He is young at 23 years old, doesn't have any caps for the squad, so maybe someone will see in the future, because I think Grbic would be ahead of him. Martin Ehrlich, and I'll do him together with Joseph Sutalo, so both central defenders who we saw starting the last 2 games as a pairing in June, which makes us wonder what's going on in central defense there. And Ehrlich is 24 years old and Sutalo 22 years old. And we'll see in the September games whether they show up again as the central defenders. Marin Pongrasic, I think he played in friendlies rather than in Nations League like the others too, but he has started 3 games for them, and he's 25 years old since 2020 with the team. And finally, you'll see the only defenders in this section, Borna Sosa. He's 24 years old and plays for Stuttgart in Germany, and he came in towards the end there, but he kind of no, he didn't. He came in after the Euro Cup and started, and actually at the end wasn't selected for the last 3 matches, so possibly a bit less likely than the others you see on the list here. And then, for midfielders and forwards, we didn't really have any new candidates, so we're going to move on to injuries. And so far, so good for Croatia. The only player who seems to be injured right now is Luka Susic, and he's a possible but unlikely candidate. He was out with a groin strain in early September. That seems to be something he would get over in time for the Cup. So I don't think it's a big concern, and no insult to him, but it wouldn't be a big loss for Croatia since he hasn't been playing that much for him. On the other hand, muscle problems in the groin region can be tricky. So even though he has actually played in early September, I don't know what I'm trying to say. Groin strain, maybe kind of an ongoing thing, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Okay, let's move on to the notable absences, and this is where we see players who have left the team especially since the 2018 World Cup for Croatia. But there are a couple who have left more recently. So Lovre Kalinic, basically a backup keeper for them, but his going along with Subasic means that the goalkeepers that they have are kind of less experienced, especially the backup keepers that they have right now. So Lovre Kalinic, actually just 32 years old, so an outside chance of coming back into the picture, but he hasn't played since the 2021 Euro Cup. Sime Versa, I always have trouble with this name, Versalico, I'll say. A veteran on the team and actually played in June of 2022. And so one would have thought he was a candidate, but he actually announced his retirement in August. But he was kind of fading out and being replaced by the right defender there now, whose name is currently eluding me. So not a huge loss because he was kind of being replaced. Ante Rebic, a forward, never really made it onto the squad, so not a huge loss for them, but they do lack forwards, and he was a starter in the World Cup and in the Euro Cup, but he hasn't played since the Euro Cup, so one less forward available to them. The rest of the players I'm going to mention actually retired in 2018. But there are people who just follow these national teams from World Cup to World Cup, so may be surprised to see them gone. Also, this is some of the key players who helped them reach the final of the World Cup. So big names that are not available to them anymore. So Daniel Subasic, the goalkeeper who was a starter in the World Cup, he announced his retirement after the World Cup. Vedran Chorluka, the central defender, also announced his retirement after the World Cup, but it was actually kind of drifting off the team. He was more important in the 2014 World Cup, but for the 2018 World Cup, he was only a substitute, but nevertheless a big name for them. Ivan Strinic, a defender who was a starter in the 2018 World Cup. He retired after the World Cup because he was diagnosed with a heart condition, but he still, and he also retired from soccer. AC Milan let him go because of that heart condition. Ivan Rakitic, I think he continued playing a little while after the World Cup, but the World Cup was his last competition, and he kind of unexpectedly announced his retirement in September 2019, so a year after the World Cup, but not available to them now. And he was also a starter in the 2018 World Cup. And finally, we talked about him in the player-by-player, Mario Mandzukic. And a big kind of loss for them because they seem to be struggling to replace the forward. So he was their starting forward in the 2018 World Cup there. So a lot of veterans missing there. And just a note on Nikola Kalinic. He was selected for the World Cup 2018. And he came to the Cup and was on the bench, and apparently not happy about that because he refused to come in as a substitute. And he was sent home, but he was never a really big player for the club, actually, on the bench, really, for all of the tournaments he appeared in since 2008. And sometimes he wasn't even selected for tournaments. So I'm not sure why he was expecting to be a starter, but there we have it. Okay, so let us go back and go over the squad again, and we'll try to nominate starters. But as I said, more and more we're kind of seeing teams going with rather a rotation of starters. So I've decided to use yellow to denote when it's two players kind of rotating, or when there's kind of a strong possibility of them starting some but not all games. I'll just get rid of this highlight here so as not to confuse. So let's start with goalkeepers. No, let's start with the manager. So Zlatko Dalic, well, with his success for the 2018 World Cup, he's been very successful as a manager, so I don't see them letting him go at this late date. Dominik Livakovic, I would say I would nominate him as the starting goalkeeper, although it might be a rotation with Ivica Ivusic, which they have been doing in recent games. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Ivusic starting a few games. The two possible candidates are Ivo Grbic and Nedeljko Labrovic, and so they'll probably be vying for the third string keeper position there. Among central defenders, we have had a rotation in the early to middle part of the cup. It was Duje Kaletakar, Dejan Lovren, and Domagoj Vida rotating, and then Josko Gvardiol came into that rotation a bit later on. But it all got blown up in the friendlies and Nations League games, with virtually none of those players showing up, just Kaletakar, and rather a bunch of new players emerging as Martin Ehrlich and Joseph Sutalo. So I really don't know what to do here. I don't know if these veterans are kind of off the squad. I don't think they are, or whether these new ones are going to replace them. So I got to say, I'm just leaving this as a confused blank. Left back, though, well, left back is also confusing because it looked like it would be Borna Sosa or Borna Barisic. I think actually Barisic will make it to the cup. But again, that kind of got blown up in the last two games when right back Josip Juranovic moved over and played the last two games. So I don't know whether that means they weren't satisfied with the left midfielder. So I got to leave that one blank too. But I can say that right back Josip Juranovic will be a starter, whether it's on the left or on the right. And we also have Josip Stanisic as a likely on the right back, whereas Sosa and Barisic are just possible candidates. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Josip Juranovic moving over to the left and Josip Stanisic playing on the right. But I'm going to leave it blank right now because I really can't hazard a guess. It's a bit easier in the midfield, though. Defensive midfielder Christian Jakic, I see him more as a substitute. He's a likely candidate, but a substitute. But I think the central midfielder Marcelo Brozovic will be a definite. Definitely make the squad, but will be a starter. And I see Mateo Kovacic, that was the name I was scrambling for earlier on. Mateo Kovacic and Luka Modric, I see them both starting. And so that central midfield of Brozovic, Kovacic and Modric, I don't see any challenges to them starting. Again, they may bring in a player for one game or two to give them rest or what have you. Mario Pasalic is an attacking midfielder. He's kind of been used all over the place, so I'm not confident enough to say he'll be a starter, though. I just want to kind of go back and look at how many games he's started actually since this period. He has started 10 of their 13 games, kind of moves around the field a little bit, which is why I guess I'm having a bit of trouble pinning him down. So I think he will be a starter. Yes, I'm going to be bold and say so. A left attacking midfielder, well, Perisic was injured at the end there in June, so Brekalo took over. I think they'll both reach the cup. We have Perisic as definite and Brekalo as likely. I think they'll both reach the cup, and I wouldn't even be surprised to see Brekalo starting a few games, but I think Perisic will be the starting left attacking midfielder. But he is getting old and not necessarily playing 90-minute games. So I think there will be room for Brekalo, perhaps even starting as the left attacking midfielder. On the right, though, it seems to be more of a rotation. So I think Vlasic. I think Vlasic will be a starter, but not necessarily on the right. Vlasic started, well, he only started 6 of their games. So I think he'll definitely be there. But actually, I'm going to pick Ivan Usic and Major as kind of alternating starters in the cup. I think they'll both get a couple of starts. And I think Vlasic will too get a few starts, but I'm not confident enough that he'll be named as a starter. So I'm kind of hedging my bets a little bit here. Again, Kramaric seems to be the starting forward, but I don't really feel like they have great confidence in him. Nevertheless, even if he doesn't start as centre forward, I think they will start him perhaps as an attacking midfielder. So I'm going to say he's a definite starter. Ante Budimir, despite having rotated a bit with Kramaric as a centre forward, strikes me more as a substitute. So I'm not confident enough even to mark him in yellow. And you see a bit of a lack of forwards there. So I wonder even if in the cup, whether they'll be experimenting with some of the attacking midfielders they have playing that role of forward. It'll be interesting, especially with Croatia, to see what they bring out in the September games in late September and in some of the friendlies, which I'm sure they're going to play going into the cup. Anyway, that brings us to the end of the podcast here. I'll just show a little picture of Croatia and see how closely my shirt matches their shirt there. Red and white anyway. That's as close as I can get. Anyway, that brings us to the end of this mediacast. So keep in mind, we'll be doing an update as new information comes out. That will probably be in early to mid-November when the teams publish their final squad list so that we can tell you how it all turned out. Meanwhile, keep an eye on us at Soccerphiles Canada. That's Soccerphiles with a PH in the middle and an S at the end, and on our website at soccerphiles.captivate.fm. And check the show notes. I've been improving the show notes to give more information. So there are links to our website and some good information there for you. Thanks so much for listening, and we will see you when we cover our next team. Bye-bye.